Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Gershon, and this is March Badness 2021. And this was, of course, created by Derek's Horror Corner, and I think this is just such a fun, little play on, obviously, the college basketball tournament. This is the horror version, pitting these classic horror movies against each other to see who comes out the greatest of all time. Now, this is the all-slasher movie version. Every film in this tournament is a slasher movie, and I definitely love me some slashers. So we're going to have a blast, guys, talking about our favorite slasher movies and pitting them against each other. And this is round one, the Myers bracket. So let's get right to it, shall we, guys? First matchup of the evening is Halloween, the classic from 1978, the masterpiece from John Carpenter, going up against I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, talk about a blowout. This is going to be the biggest blowout of the entire tournament. Obviously, it's going to be Halloween. No match whatsoever. No contest. Next round, it's going to be Friday the 13th, Part 3 in 3D. Going up against The Burning from 1981. Another summer camp massacre. So definitely going to go with The Burning on this one. I think this is a really solid camp slasher, and one of the best outside of the Friday the 13th franchise. And Friday the 13th Part 3 is not one of my favorites in the franchise. It's one of my least favorite, actually. I just feel like it doesn't hold up well. It's very campy, and a lot of the effects look very dated today. But The Burning still looks really good. Okay, next round, it's going to be the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre from 1974. Going up against Sleepaway Camp 3. Now, as much as I love the Sleepaway Camp series, and I do really enjoy the third movie, Teenage Wasteland, but come on. You're going up against one of the greatest horror movies ever made. So obviously Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, is going to win that round. Next up we have My Bloody Valentine, classic slasher from 1981, going up against Urban Legend, which is a really solid slasher from the Scream era. That's kind of one of the movies that was around that Scream boom. Once Scream came out, there were a bunch of films kind of in that territory. And Urban Legend is definitely one of the better ones. But I'm definitely going to go with My Bloody Valentine. I absolutely love this movie. I think it's an absolute classic of a slasher movie. When you think 80s slasher, this is one of the first movies you think of, and I love it, Classic look for the slasher killer with the mining outfit and the pickaxe, and some awesome gore effects, which, if you get this Scream Factory version, are the gore effects are put back into the movie, and they look much better than they did in the original special edition version. Highly recommend that. Next up is going to be Psycho, the original classic from 1960, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I call this the granddaddy of all slasher movies right here. Going up against Bloody Birthday. Once again, a huge blowout. There's no way. You honestly think I'm going to pick Bloody Birthday over the original Psycho? Then you're crazy. Next up is going to be Candyman versus Curse of Chucky. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of Candyman or the Candyman franchise. I mean, it's a pretty solid movie, but I don't know, I just never really got into it. But it's definitely better than Curse of Chucky, that's for sure. So Candyman wins that round. Next up, it's going to be Scream 4, which was a surprisingly good return to form for the franchise. Going up against The New York Ripper, directed by Lucio Fulci, the Italian gore master. Who's going to win that one, huh? Very interesting. As much as I enjoyed Scream 4, and it was a nice return to form, I'm definitely going with The New York Ripper, which is what I feel the most brutal slasher movie of all time. Probably the sleaziest, too. Definitely going New York Ripper on that one. That movie just has to be seen to be believed. Next up, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the classic from Wes Craven from 1984, the original masterpiece. Going up against Wrong Turn 4. Come on. It's A Nightmare on Elm Street, hands down. It's not even a matchup at all. It's an absolute blowout. Much like the Super Bowl was this past couple months ago. Alright, moving onwards to the next round. It's going to be Halloween from 1978, taking on The Burning from 1981. Interesting matchup there. And where I feel that The Burning is definitely a really solid slasher movie. You're talking about what I feel is the greatest horror movie ever made, so it's no contest there. It's going to be Halloween 1978. Sorry, Burning fans. Next round, it's going to be the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, taking on My Bloody Valentine from 1981, the Canadian slasher, versus one of the scariest horror films of all time, in my personal opinion, and a 5-star masterpiece in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's why Texas Chainsaw Massacre takes this round, for sure. Next up, we have Psycho, the original classic from 1960 from Alfred Hitchcock, taking on Candyman, starring Tony Todd. Slasher that is very highly regarded, you know, especially in the 90s, considered one of the best 90s slasher movies. But definitely going the original Psycho. Can't beat the original Psycho. It's an absolute classic. It's an absolute masterpiece. And it's my personal favorite of Alfred Hitchcock's work. Next up, we have The New York Ripper taking on A Nightmare on Elm Street. The debut of Freddy Krueger, the most iconic horror villain of all time, in my opinion. Yeah, you gotta go the original Elm Street on that one. It's just phenomenal movie, and each time I watch it, I'm reminded just how great it is. I love The New York Ripper, but we're talking about a masterpiece here in Nightmare on Elm Street. Alright, on to the next round, guys. It's heating up. So we got Halloween taking on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Ooh. Oh, that's a great matchup right there. Both have very little in the way of blood and gore, which is really interesting. Because of the brutal subject matter of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's very little blood in that movie, very little gore. Same thing with Halloween. You got a serial killer cutting up young teenagers, but we barely see any gore. It's all about the style of the filmmaking in both films, but I think even more so in the original Halloween. The style of that movie is just unmatched. The direction, the score, and it's just terrifying. All these things work so well together, including the great characters in Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis, and all the young girls, and it's just a classic movie. Every scene is just iconic in Halloween. It just sticks with you. So that's why I'm going to give the win to Halloween 1978. It's the more memorable film. It's the more iconic, with more iconic images than the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. As good as that movie is, gonna give the edge to Halloween 78. But that's a real close one. That's a very thin margin now. And another great matchup coming up next in Psycho from 1960 taking on the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Oh, very, very creative movie, Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven. One of the most unique ideas for a slasher movie, giving birth to an iconic franchise, an iconic villain in Freddy Krueger, and what a brilliant score. And another film with a great score, the original Psycho. Absolutely brilliant. Bernard Herrmann. Phenomenal score, phenomenal direction by Alfred Hitchcock. And that's where I think the edge is going to go to Alfred Hitchcock. It's so iconic for that shower scene alone, the way that's filmed. It is just so iconic, so memorable. And yeah, you got two iconic horror villains. You got Norman Bates and Freddy Krueger. Man, really tough. But without Psycho, there would not be a Nightmare on Elm Street. There would not be a slasher genre, period, without Psycho. That's why I'm giving the edge to Psycho. Oh, next round is an absolute barn burner, folks. The original Halloween from 1978 taking on the masterpiece Psycho from 1960. Two immortal classics going at it. But you know me, guys. You see this shirt I'm wearing? It's going to be the original Halloween. So, rightfully so, you got the original Halloween from 1978 with a horror villain Michael Myers winning the Myers bracket here. So that's it, guys, for this round of March Badness from 2021. Special shout out goes to Derek's Horror Corner for creating the concept, and thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Urshan, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.